It is risen. It is risen indeed. So yesterday, I went to see the film Risen in theaters, and I posted that I went to see it on my Twitter, and a lot of people were like, well, Kevin, what did you think about it? So, like a pretentious jerk, I said, well, you're just gonna have to wait till I release a video about it tomorrow, instead of me just answering you right now. But then I had to spend my entire Saturday putting together a review of the film, so here we go. So Risen is a biblical fiction story about the investigation that followed the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Basically, it tells a fictional story, but within the time period surrounding events that happen in history, like Ben-Hur of the Bronze Bow or Johnny Tremaine. This one is based around the criminal investigation of the alleged theft of the body of Christ. Right off the bat, that is a really intriguing premise to me, because a detective or an investigator is a great way to tell a story without having uncomfortable exposition, but also being able to tell the audience what is going on, because a detective is supposed to be asking questions. This movie executed, no pun intended, this story quite well. I mean, the acting was fantastic. It stars Joseph Fiennes, the star of one of my favorite Christian films, Luther, plus one of my favorite TV shows, Flash Forward, which got canceled too early, and Shakespeare in Love, which I didn't see because it had that sex scene in it. Point being, great actor. Rest of the cast did really well. Production-wise, I gotta say that this was probably the most like biblical times real feeling film. As much as Passion of the Christ wanted to say, oh, this is raw and gritty, like there's so much blood and so much gore and so much slow motion that it doesn't feel real, where this, I don't know if they shot it on location, but having seen Focus on the Families That the World May Know series, I know that this looks like the real place. It's all sandy and dusty. There's this battle and they're like throwing rocks and people are getting hit. When they're throwing rocks, it's like, doink, doink. It feels like the real sound effects of that stuff happening. It's not like all 300 where it's like,
I'm slicing you in half.
The movie focuses a lot on making sure everything is pretty historically accurate. Not being a historian myself, I've heard lots of things in church and on History Channel and stuff about like different things about the crucifixion and in Roman times. For example, I've heard that whenever they nailed Jesus to the cross, they would have had to have put the nails here in his wrist rather than his hand because the nail would rip out. That's disgusting. And there were other aspects of this, you know, location-wise, that just made it feel like, oh, they really did their historical research on this. On the other hand, knowing the Bible and knowing the stories of the Bible, I knew that there were several things that were not accurate to the Bible. It almost feels like they went through the, hey, what are the top 10 Sunday school stories that happened after Jesus rose from the dead? Let's make sure we include those, like bringing in the fish from the boat, right? There was one about that. Wasn't there one that like he goes up into the sky like Superman or something? Just little things that made me think, well, you did a lot of historical research, but then you forgot to open up the Bible and just kind of make sure it matches with that. Cinematography is fantastic. The story is so intriguing for the first half. The first half of the movie is just the investigation going on and he's picking up clues. It's very good because this guy doesn't believe that Jesus really rose from the dead because he's a logical person. And I thought it was really interesting because at one point he comes across one of Jesus's disciples and the guy seems like a hippie or a stoner or something. And so you're kind of like, well, who is this guy? He acts like he's in a cult. So it really adds to the kind of doubt. You're like, these people, there's something off about these people. And you're actually at a place at one point where you're like, this guy kind of has a point, but then there's a moment right in the middle where everything kind of switches around. They kind of do the opposite of the Jaws effect where you didn't see the shark and so you're like, oh, I don't know if the shark is real or is it fake? What could it be? You don't see the monster, and so there's that level of doubt. But halfway through the movie, spoiler alert, they show you the monster. And at that point, the movie kind of ends for me and it becomes very preachy and it doesn't allow you to think for yourself. What I wish would have happened is actually had him investigating and then he's coming across this evidence even though he doubts the whole time, but then he's realizing, well, I have to do my job and my job indicates that I have to follow the evidence and the evidence leads to undeniable proof that Jesus must have risen from the dead. He brings this to Pontius Pilate and then Pilate is like, we can't have that, you have to lie. And he says, you know, I can't lie. And then he goes to Galilee and then it could end with him just seeing like something going up into the sky at a distance that could be anything. Then you would have kind of an Inception type conversation after the film where people could say like, well, was the movie trying to say that Jesus didn't really raise from the dead? Or was the movie saying that he really did and the evidence led to that? Or did this guy get too invested into the case that he delusioned himself? Because I think that the evidence pointing towards proof of the resurrection would be a stronger case for the real life faith of Christianity rather than creating a film where it's inside of the world and then it's like, well, now you're in a world where Jesus exists, so we believe it, so you must believe it. Give the people something to think about because it's not really evidence that Jesus rose from the dead if you hire an actor and bring him in and say, look, this is Jesus. Because that's that's not really Jesus. That's just an actor. And another thing that bothered me about the film is they always portray Jesus like he's this hippie cult leader who always has something on his mind. He's like, I know something you don't know, and you know, he's got this smug smirk. The most unapproachable person ever. I would never talk to that guy, and I can't believe if Jesus had thousands of people following him, there's no way he could have been like that. Now, saying that, it was really neat to see some of those Sunday school stories told in such a real feeling way, and that may be just because of my Christian background that I'm like, oh cool, I heard this story in Sunday school. Now it's being played out on the big screen. In the end, wasn't a terrible film. I really enjoyed it. If you want to go see it, whether you're a Christian or you're not a Christian, it's an interesting film. If I'm gonna do a rating system based on a number, I think I'd have to do it 1 to 100. With this, it would land right at 61. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this episode. Big shout out to Brendan Neely, who gives to my Patreon. I'm gonna start doing more of these movie reviews. If I go see a movie in theaters, I'll probably come back and just do a quick review, whether it's a Christian movie or not. Doesn't matter. I don't mind talking about movies. In fact, it's my favorite thing to do. Check out some of my long form reviews if you want to see more of what I think about movies, and I will talk to you later. Good night.